So Andy, coming to you, because obviously Nine23 supports regulated and compliant, kind of heavily regulated industries.
Yes.
I think it's interesting that obviously a lot of those regulators, not those regulations, can be inherently complex.
Yeah.
They can be quite far-reaching, and they're generally devised, implemented, and then kind of supervised by people that don't understand the technical complexities for fairly obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I think you've got this interesting section where businesses have to be able to balance their regulatory requirements with the complexities and management of the actual technical underpinning to actually achieve that business value. And then at some point, you have individuals that are supposed to understand and achieve both those understandings. So in terms of making sure people are able to make informed decisions or can navigate that kind of contextual complexity, what do you find useful in that space? What kind of dialogue have you seen demand from customers that they're not technologists, but they know this thing's absolutely fundamental to how they run the business?
The thing has to comply with ISO 27001. Like they get told that, they go, okay, how do we do that? And they get the enormous document that is 27001 and start reading it, give up, ring their friend who's heard of ISO 27001, who points them to someone who actually knows about it. So it's the person finding out about their requirement, the initial requirement, which often gets a couple of other ISO type things tagged onto it just towards the end. And then that, when their initial conversation, someone goes, what is the upshot of this? Am I still going to be able to achieve what I set out to achieve whilst complying with all that? And that whole conversation tends to happen, I think, quite slowly and with a lot of shock and awe. So I don't really know what would fix that.
One of the things that we see being spoken about a lot at the EU level, and it's something that it's kind of Red Hat with the open source way of building software products, is digital commons. And one of the things that we hope that we will see in the future is, if you particularly when you look at regulated industries, say financial services, there's no competitive advantage by being compliant. Everyone's got to do it in some way. So what we would love to see in the future, and it may be that we see this through more things like digital commons, is where resources are pulled to solve a compliance challenge, where every organisation puts somebody forward to try and solve this challenge that everyone has to solve anyway, rather than one organisation putting a lot of resources into solving it. So it could actually mean that there's less resources needed by individual companies. It solves the common challenge of adhering to these regulations, and then you can start looking at things like automation to see policy as code. How can we run automation through this to make sure that we are compliant? So that may be something we see more happening through things like digital commons in the future. And it'll certainly be a much more beneficial way for regulated industries to solve challenges, as opposed to we're going to put 15 people on this trying to read these mega compliance audits and stuff to solve these challenges. So yeah, that may be something we see in the future with digital sovereignty.
See, I don't think that works. Not because the idea is wrong. I think the idea is brilliant.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is that you still end up with somebody inside the organisation having to make a risk management decision. And that risk needs to be informed based on a whole bunch of factors, some of which will be how do you cross your T's and dot your I's. And I think the worry that goes through my head about that kind of template approach is it obfuscates some of that risk from the observer. So, just because you have a solution that works right to, fit a triangle problem, doesn't necessarily mean that, it fits another rhomboid function.
Yeah.
And so I worry that those kind of solutions produce an abstraction that turns around and says, actually, I have a generic case answer here, and then they miss nuance that comes out as a result. I don't think it's a bad idea in itself. I just think that some of it is going to require a greater degree of maturity than I see actually being present in a lot of organisations to actually do the investigation and digging. Because, so a simple example, just because I have ISO 27001 as an entity, you'd still need to have ISO 27001 on services that you operate in my cloud. and so you still actually have to go through that complexity and problem and understanding. Having common solutions to problems is a great thing, but understanding how the tool is used is really, really vitally important.
Yep.
And I think that is something that a lot of people are going to have to develop.
I think that's where obviously the automation come in of that, so they can actually check anything that's built in that situation is then relevant for their organisation. There will always be certain differences that will need to be looked at.
A place I find it most isn't in regulation, not in the true sense, it's in contractual terms that have been agreed, you know, in the 1800s, typically, for a project where, you know, in the 1800s we said that, you know, we would have people wearing knickerbockers and pointy shoes and carry halberds, and that control still gets applied into the current day. Because nobody's actually gone back to challenge it. And so one of the steps, I guess, is actually having the ability to go back into your current contracting body and challenge some of those beliefs and positions, because some of them aren't